When I placed the sonogram photo in my mother's hands, I expected her to smile, maybe even cry a little. Instead, she looked at it for 2 seconds, curled her lip, and burst into a laugh that felt like a slap across my face. "Oh, great," she said, tossing the photo onto the kitchen counter like it was trash mail. Another problem for this family to deal with. My father didn't even look up from his plate. He just muttered, "As if we don't have enough to handle already." I stood there frozen, waiting for someone in that room to say congratulations. No one did. What my parents didn't know was that the daughter they had just insulted was the same daughter who had been quietly paying their bills for years. And what I decided to do next would tear their entire comfortable world apart. My name is Harper Bellamy, and I am 31 years old. For most of my life, I have played the role of the responsible one, the daughter nobody worried about because I never gave anyone a reason to. My younger brother, Tyler, was the golden child. He was 27, unemployed for most of the last 3 years, and living rent-free in the guest house behind my parents' property. Every family gathering somehow turned into a celebration of Tyler. Tyler got a new car. Tyler was thinking about starting a business. Tyler was finding himself. Meanwhile, I worked 12-hour shifts as a hospital administrator, quietly building a stable life, and nobody ever asked how I was doing. They just assumed I was fine because I never complained. The night everything broke happened at what was supposed to be a simple Sunday lunch. My husband Daniel and I had been trying for a baby for almost 2 years. When the test finally came back positive, I cried for an hour out of pure relief. We decided to tell my parents in person because I foolishly believed this news might finally make them proud of me. I brought the sonogram in a small white envelope and waited until dessert was served before I handed it to my mother. My hands were shaking. I remember thinking, maybe this is the moment they finally see me. Instead, my mother glanced at the image, snorted, and said the words that changed everything. "Another problem." Just like that. Not a question. Not even shock. Just a flat, cruel statement, like she was reading off a grocery list. My father backed her up without missing a beat, saying they already had enough responsibility keeping Tyler afloat and didn't need another mouth to worry about in this family. Daniel's hand tightened around mine under the table. I felt something inside me crack, quiet and permanent, like ice breaking under weight nobody could see. To understand why those words cut so deep, you need to understand what I had been silently carrying for the past 5 years. While Tyler lived off my parents' generosity, I was the one actually keeping their finances from collapsing. When my father's small hardware store started losing money, I was the one who quietly transferred funds every month to cover payroll so his 3 employees wouldn't lose their jobs. When my parents refinanced their house and got buried under a predatory loan, I was the one who sat down with a financial advisor, restructured the debt, and personally co-signed the new mortgage because their credit score was in ruins. When Tyler wrecked his car for the 2nd time and needed a new one to look successful for a job interview, guess who transferred $8,000 into his account without a single thank you? Me. Always me. Nobody in that family knew how much they depended on me because I never made a big deal out of it. I paid quietly. I fixed things quietly. I believed that if I kept holding everything together without complaint, eventually they would notice. Eventually they would love me the way they loved Tyler. I was wrong. I had built an entire safety net under their lives, and they didn't even see the net. They just assumed the ground was solid. The car ride home that night was silent until Daniel pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. He turned to me, his jaw tight with anger he was clearly trying to control. "Harper," he said, "I am done watching them treat you like this. You're about to be a mother. You don't owe them your silence anymore." I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I let myself really feel the weight of everything I had been carrying. He was right. My child deserved a mother who wasn't constantly drained by people who saw her as nothing more than a walking checkbook. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk with my laptop open until 3 in the morning, going through every account, every agreement, every signature that tied my name to my parents' financial survival. I found the co-signed mortgage documents. I found the automatic transfers I had set up 2 years earlier to cover my father's business overhead. I found the guarantee letter I had written for Tyler's apartment lease, The one that meant if he ever stopped paying rent, I would be legally responsible for covering it. Piece by piece, I started building a plan. Not out of revenge, but out of survival. They called my baby a problem. They were about to discover what a real problem looked like. 2 weeks passed, and not one person in my family reached out. No apology, no check-in, not even a simple text asking how I was feeling. Then on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang and my mother's name lit up the screen. Some small, foolish part of me hoped she was calling to apologize. I picked up, and her first words were not "How are you?" or "I'm sorry." Her first words were a request. She needed me to cover Tyler's rent for the month because he was, in her words, going through a rough patch again. I sat there in complete silence, staring at my phone, wondering if she had any idea what she had just asked me to do only 2 weeks after calling my unborn child a problem. What she said next made my blood run cold, and it confirmed exactly why I had already made my decision. I asked her calmly, "What exactly did you just say to me?" My mother sighed like I was the one being difficult. "Tyler is behind on rent again, Harper. You know he's trying to get back on his feet. It's not that big of a deal. You've done it before." I sat there gripping the phone, thinking about how easily she said those words, as if my bank account was a family utility that never ran dry. I told her, as calmly as I could manage, that Mark and I sorry, that Daniel and I were focused on our own family now, and I would not be covering Tyler's rent this month or any month going forward. The silence on the other end lasted only a second before she scoffed. "Don't start acting bitter over one comment your father made. You're being dramatic, Harper. This family needs you to be reasonable, not selfish." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. It was short and cold. "If you're going to abandon this family over a joke, don't expect to be part of it when it matters." I read the message twice, feeling a strange, cold clarity settle over me. The same clarity I used every day at work when a case needed to be handled without emotion. I typed back for words. "Understood. You'll see." Then I set the phone down and looked at Daniel, who was watching me from across the room with quiet pride in his eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The following Saturday, my parents invited us over for what they called a family sit-down to clear the air. When Daniel and I walked into that living room, the energy in the house felt like a courtroom. Tyler was already there, lounging on the couch in a way that made it obvious he considered himself untouchable. My mother sat stiffly in her armchair, arms crossed, while my father stood by the fireplace like he was preparing to deliver a verdict. "We think it's time you apologize to your brother," my mother said the moment I sat down. "You embarrassed him by refusing to help during a hard time, and frankly, Harper, your attitude lately has been unacceptable." Tyler smirked from the couch. "Yeah, I get that you're pregnant and stressed, but you don't have to take it out on me. Some of us are actually trying to build something here." My father nodded along, adding that I needed to learn some humility instead of acting like my hospital job made me better than the rest of the family. I let them finish. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed a single folder on the coffee table, then opened it slowly. "Tyler," I said, my voice steady, "congratulations on the new apartment lease you signed last month." I turned a page. "As the co-signer and guarantor on that lease, I want you to know I filed a formal withdrawal of guarantee this week. Your landlord received the notice yesterday morning. Without a qualifying co-signer, your lease is now under review, and there's a strong chance you'll be asked to vacate within 30 days unless you can requalify on your own income." The room went completely silent. Tyler's smug expression drained from his face in an instant. "Wait, you can't just do that," he stammered, sitting upright. "I can, and I already did," I said calmly, turning to my parents. "And since apparently I'm nothing but a burden who causes problems for this family, I've also submitted paperwork to end the automatic transfers that have been covering Dad's payroll shortfall for the past 2 years. That account closes at the end of this month." My father's face went pale. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I continued, my voice never wavering. "I also spoke with a lawyer this week about the mortgage refinance I co-signed 3 years ago. I'm formally requesting to be removed as a co-borrower. Given my credit history and income, The bank has already indicated they'll need to reassess the loan terms without my name attached, which likely means a significantly higher interest rate or a demand for repayment restructuring. The folder sat open on the table between us like a verdict nobody could argue with. My mother finally found her voice, and it came out as a shriek. "You are destroying this family, Harper. How could you do this to us? We are your parents." My father's hands were trembling as he gripped the edge of the fireplace mantel, looking suddenly 10 years older than he had 5 minutes earlier. Tyler was already on his phone, scrolling frantically through something, his face turning a sickly shade of white. "The landlord already sent an email," he said, his voice cracking. "They're saying I have until the end of the month to find a new guarantor or vacate." He looked up at me with wide, panicked eyes, all his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Harper, please. You have to fix this. I'll lose everything." I looked around that living room at the same people who, 2 weeks earlier, had laughed at my sonogram and called my unborn child a problem. Now they were the ones panicking, the ones scrambling, the ones facing the consequences of a foundation they never once thanked me for building. I felt something unexpected in that moment. Not anger, not satisfaction, just an overwhelming sense of calm, the kind that comes when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry alone. My mother reached toward me with shaking hands, her voice softening into something close to begging. "Please, Harper, we didn't mean it. You know how your father jokes." I almost laughed at how quickly her tone had shifted from cruelty to desperation the moment she realized who had actually been holding their world together. But what she said next, the offer she made to try to win me back, was something none of us saw coming. And it would change the entire direction of this story. My mother's hands were still shaking as she looked at me, her voice dropping into something almost pleading. "Harper, listen to me. We will make things right. Your father and I have talked about it, and once the baby comes, we want to put your name on the house. Real ownership, not just a mortgage. You'll finally have something to show for everything you've done." I stared at her, stunned for a moment, not because the offer moved me, but because even now, in the middle of losing everything, she still thought this was a negotiation. She still believed there was a number, a deed, a piece of paper that could buy back 5 years of being treated like an inconvenience. I shook my head slowly. "This was never about money, Mom. I didn't do this because I wanted something from you. I did this because I finally realized I was never going to get what I actually wanted, which was just to be treated like your daughter instead of your safety net." My father, still gripping the fireplace mantel, tried a different approach. His voice dropped low, almost gentle, the way it used to sound when I was a kid, and he wanted me to forgive him for missing another one of my school events. "Harper, please, think about your child. Do you really want your baby growing up without grandparents? Without family?" It was a low blow, and he knew it. But instead of the guilt he expected, I felt something closer to pity. "My baby," I said quietly, "is going to grow up in a home where love isn't something you have to pay for." "That's exactly why I'm doing this." Tyler, still frantically typing on his phone, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "So what? You're just going to let me lose my apartment over one comment at dinner?" I turned to him, and for the first time in years, I let myself say what I actually felt instead of what kept the peace. "This was never about one comment, Tyler. This is about 5 years of me paying your rent, your car payments, your emergency loans, while you called my job a joke and never once asked how I was doing. I'm not punishing you. I'm just done rescuing you." The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind where everyone finally understands that the ground beneath them has actually shifted and there's no talking their way back to solid footing. Daniel stood up beside me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "We should go," he said quietly, and for once, nobody in that room tried to stop us. We walked out of that house without slamming the door, without raising our voices, without giving them the dramatic exit scene they probably expected. We simply left, and the silence behind us said more than any argument ever could. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded exactly as the paperwork had promised. Tyler scrambled to find a new guarantor for his lease, and when no one qualified, he was forced to move into a small studio apartment on the other side of town. One he had to furnish and pay for entirely on his own for the first time in his adult life. My father's hardware store, without the monthly cushion I had quietly provided for 2 years, had to lay off one part-time employee and cut store hours just to stay afloat. My parents, facing a mortgage they could no longer manage without my name attached, ended up selling their house and downsizing into a much smaller place across town, a place with a mortgage payment they could actually afford on their own income. It wasn't cruelty. It was simply what their life looked like without the invisible support I had been providing for years. I would be lying if I said there weren't moments of doubt during those months. Late at night, I would sometimes wonder if I had been too harsh, if there was a gentler way I could have handled things. But then I would remember my mother's laugh echoing through that kitchen, the way she tossed my sonogram photo aside like it meant nothing, the word she used to describe my unborn child. Another problem. And every time that memory surfaced, my doubt disappeared, replaced by a quiet, steady certainty that I had made the right choice, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. 6 months later, Daniel and I welcomed a healthy baby girl into the world. We named her Grace, because that was exactly what our home was finally filled with: grace, peace, and a kind of love that never once made her feel like a burden. My parents did eventually reach out again, cautiously, months after everything had settled. The conversations were different now, quieter, more careful. There was no more talk of favors or transfers or guarantees. For the first time in my life, our relationship, whatever was left of it, existed without me holding up the weight of their entire world on my shoulders. Looking back, I don't regret walking out of that living room, and I don't regret the folder I placed on that coffee table. I spent 5 years being the invisible foundation of a family that only noticed me when they needed something. The moment they called my daughter a problem was the moment I finally understood that some relationships only change when the person carrying everyone else finally decides to put the weight down. Now I want to hear from you. If your own family had laughed at your happiest moment and called your child a problem, would you have done what I did, or would you have given them one more chance? Comment the city you're watching from below so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Thank you for listening.